Hello, and behalf of the Borders Women in Agriculture group, I would like to welcome you along to what is the third of this year's meetings. Today, the theme is farm business planning, and I'm delighted to be joined tonight by David Bailey, and hopefully at some stage we'll get Gordon Whitford, both from HSBC, who I'll introduce in just a few minutes. For those of you who don't know me or are new to the group, my name is George Gawley, and I am also being ably helped in the background by Tiffany McTaggart and Jack Zull. I'd just also like to take this opportunity to remind you that off the back of our previous social media presence meeting, which we held back in the summer, we have managed to record two podcasts. The first with Lucy Tyle from Barkin Farm, and the second with Harriet Busby from Border Berries. These podcasts are great examples of two local businesses who are using social media to their advantage and really back up the content from that meeting which we held back in the summer. So if you haven't watched, if you haven't listened to those podcasts, I would encourage you to go and have a listen. The plan is also to record more podcasts off the back of these women in agriculture meetings. The idea being to try to back up some of the meeting content with real life examples from businesses in the borders. So just moving on, the title of tonight's meeting is Farm Business Planning, a View from the Bank. And I guess before I go any further, I just wanted to know a wee bit more about the audience, you guys participating tonight. So I'm just gonna launch a poll, and I'd just like you to vote yes or no. Have you ever had to prepare a business plan for the bank? Okay, well, it looks like everyone's voted. So the results are in, and it looks like we've got a bit of a split here tonight. We've got probably a mixture of newer entrants and more established businesses. So 47% of you with no experience of dealing with the bank or seeking finance, and the majority of you here, 53%, with some experience. So I think this is a good time to bring in David Bailey. We've got David Bailey from HSBC, and he's the Agriculture Relationship Director. So David, welcome along to tonight. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you very much for having me.
You're not the scary bank manager type person that I was expecting.
No. All relaxed and happy at the moment, so all good.
Grand. And it's worth noting that we're hoping to have Gordon Whitford join us, but he appears to be having some internet connection issues. So David, I think I'm just going to pass over to you, and you can begin your presentation.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Don't want to bore you too much, obviously, with presentations and PowerPoints as such, but just give you an overview of who I am. So as David Bailey, I'm the Agricultural Director for HSBC in Scotland. Nearly 20 years now in banking. 9 years of that has been in agriculture and renewables, working across Royal Bank of Scotland, Santander, and now HSBC. I covered Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now with HSBC, I predominantly cover the borders, a little bit of Northern England, and sort of up towards Dundee within my customer base. So today is just really to run through what a bank primarily looks for and what the sort of key areas are to try and focus on when you're doing your sort of business plan. So if we look at the agenda, so as I say, we'll run through the business plan in itself, future strategy, what the bank sort of looks for, and that'll cover off some certain areas that we'll obviously have hopefully some questions about as well. And then I'll give you a sort of general overview of what HSBC is currently sort of doing in the market at the moment. So apologies for some of the figures here. We've been chasing the Scottish and I suppose even to a certain extent the governments for up-to-date figures. So based on last year, 2018, these are the figures that were sort of within the growth area of agriculture. And then other sources outside of normal regular bank finance was sort of around 1.2 billion. HSBC UK as pledged, this was obviously COVID situation, but it's still not changed, 1 billion of lending to support SME businesses in the agricultural sector. To this day, my understanding is we're still the only bank that has actually allocated a ring-fenced amount for the sector. Apologies for the typo there, but HSBC has 90 relationship managers in agriculture across the UK and Northern Ireland, and 5 relationship directors currently covering Scotland, with the plans of expansion in due course. As ever, our main aim is to plan and manage and to provide additional support to agricultural businesses throughout the period. HSBC, as a global bank, we are situated across the world. We have operating in 66 countries, territories worldwide, and obviously, over 3,000 offices as well, with supporting over 38 million customers at this time. So, like we say with most customers or most businesses, is successful businesses have to be prepared to change. I suppose at this moment with COVID, it's probably never been more prime to show that customers or businesses have to have the ability to be able to change as and when required, and that's within regulation or requirements or various other things that may impact global issues. Effective approaches, there's always the sort of governance that what was done before might not be what's ready or what should be doing going forward. Change, is it good or bad? Yes, there's going to be fight or some sort of fear of change, but like everything needs to adapt and evolve within its environment. And these will provide challenges. In most cases, it's the people that adapt the quickest and the people that move in line with it that will often provide success in that area. One of the main things and what we've seen as a key driver, especially maybe over the past sort of decade, I suppose, is starting to treat agriculture and farming enterprises as businesses as such, or commercial businesses or corporate businesses. And it's how do we adapt to those things, and how do we look at things that we can do differently? How do we make things more efficiently? What type of new ventures, new schemes are coming through, or new initiatives that are coming through that can help the agricultural sector. Also as well, instead of just looking at the standard agricultural practices, what do you have available, within your means at this time that would provide you with a potential to diversify and provide an additional income stream? So how do you interact, with your buyer as such? So the future in itself, where do we see, obviously with Brexit, about to come on our doorstep after COVID? Our main push is to encourage our customers, to be progressive, to look at ways of changing how they operate and how they work via either technology or innovation. Are they aware of what their inputs and outputs are in regards to the UK scale and global scale? And do they follow that chain of supply right through to the end to get an understanding of what they do from the farm gate? And as I touched on before, it's, do they take the commercial approach? Are they treating, the farm as an operating business, or does it still sort of feel like a bit like a sort of hobbyist approach? Are they focusing on their margins? Are they focusing on the profitability of the business and what cash is available? So in regards to when we talk about how farmers will need to take on that sort of commercial approach, is what do we sort of ask them to look at and focus on? It boils down to, I suppose, generating profit and cash. And in many cases is the question of understanding where your cost of production is and your break-even prices, and the average throughout the year. Business planning, investment appraisal, as I touched on before, engaging with the supply chain and ensuring that what you are putting out the gate as such is actually what is asked for and what is needed, so you don't have any wastage. If hypothetically, if you're doing cattle and you're fattening them up and you're getting them up to 400 kilos, is that actually where you need to be, or is it, do you need to be at that 350 mark? Efficiencies within the business, we're starting to see now, and this is obviously what we're doing today as well, is open communication. It's not being afraid to speak to your colleague or speak to another farmer or visiting another farm and seeing how they do things, how they adapt, and seeing if you can bring these efficiencies into your business. Don't be scared to contact or speak to a bank if you're looking for further information on how finances work or business planning. Same time, speaking to your agricultural specialists, colleges, and so forth, accountants. Not everyone's not an expert in all fields, so we encourage our customers, and we actually like to see that they will go out and bring in people to their business that adds that sort of specialist sector to it. And being, ability to adapt. Things are changing within the market. People's health is changing. Veganism, other general areas of health. Different types of milk, going down oat, almond, all these various things. So it might, at the initial outset, feel like it's damaging towards the sector, but there might be potential to adapt and actually diversify and be able to ensure that you take advantage of these changes in the market. That falls into the utilisation of farm resources. So are you getting the best pound for per acre as such, or have you got wastage within the farm that could actually be adapted and used for something else? And I suppose, like anything, it's just getting up and saying that you have the ability to actually make a change and adapt the business to the best of its ability. Where we are within the market, agriculture is a very positive place at the moment for us as a bank. Our appetite for the agricultural sector is very strong. As I touched on before, we've allocated $1 billion of funding for the sector. We're on the next page, Jack. Where we're looking at, within this is without going through each one, is just sort of trying to get the strengths of the business out and how they can adapt to potential changes, whether it be within Brexit, COVID. It may be that you feel these are going to be negative, but at the same time they may actually provide opportunity. to grow the business or to adapt into different areas. We want to ensure, or we want businesses to be fully committed. So we are very much positive side of the management or the owners of the farm. It's how they operate, what the track record is. We are fully aware within the farming and agricultural sector that at the moment they have potential issues in regards to what they can demand for their products as such, depending on what contracts are in. But at the moment we are seeing a massive uptake in beef, especially. I don't think we can get enough of that into the shelves or into the markets. So we're seeing a good positive trend on that side. Obviously not if you're potentially looking to buy, but capital intensive. So once again, this is how the structure works. We need to get that even balance between debt on the farm and to what the outputs are. And then as a similar, Brexit will obviously come with some negatives along with as COVID did at the moment, but we are seeing some positives from that side as well. So within the business plan itself, what do we generally sort of look for in our key areas? Well, first and foremost, at the moment, we really are keen on ensuring that the farming business is well managed. Our big forefront, and it has been in my previous roles as well, is that we need to be 100% confident in the management team or in the farming business that's behind the proposal. That's most of our effort and most of what we put forward is to establish that the management team and the business there is able to hit the numbers that they're either putting forward or they've got the track record that shows the ability to do so. So we sort of focus on the team, the people around it, and how that's performed. Within the business plan, we need to obviously prove accountability within the numbers. So doesn't necessarily mean that it relies on you, the farmer, or there to provide these. They can be done via an accountant or an agricultural specialist, a consultant, to provide evidence. Doesn't always have to be positive as such. We do want some sort of reality check to show plan A, plan B. Not everything will be rosy and streamline all the way up. So business plans have to have some sort of gut check or reality check to say that, this is what we expect, but worst case scenario, this is where else we could be. And from us, that once again just shows the business and the management team have an understanding of what is happening, in a positive and negative environment. So as I touched on, integrity, credibility, realism, and clarity. So the business plan doesn't have to be War and Peace. It just needs to be, pretty much to the point and cover off the required information, but in a nice sort of short span. We don't want to be, sitting with a 60-page document and having to go through. We want something that sort of, gets to the point and provides us with the accurate information as required. Overview, of all assets within the farm. So whether it's a farming statement of affairs, balance sheet that just shows, assets held, machinery, cattle, all those sort of things in regards to the outside of just your bog standard sort of land that's there. We go into the numbers. So yes, projected profit, cash, capital, and sort of budgets that's needed. I would always emphasize on trying to be realistic with the budgets and work it with a little bit of fat around it. With us, what we don't want is, and hypothetically, is you're saying I need 100,000 that'll, in an overdraft facility, for instance, and then we're 6 months in and that's already been exhausted, and you're looking for double that. What that shows is that from the outset, that the actual numbers that were projected or what was put there, the credibility around it potentially wasn't there to begin with. Sensitivity, as I touched on, so that's where, as I said, we need a little bit of understanding on the market, where you feel what you're asking for, what the averages are against benchmark, and where we see it against what we have or what we hold from our data. And funnily enough, at the same time, it's good to have a consultant and it's good to have an accountant, but you can't just sort of hand them a blank piece of paper and say, go and just do me a favor and put a business plan together for me. You need to understand what these numbers relate to. And this even goes back to even annual accounts that are being produced. You need to understand that, what was that, what's that line for, and how did you get to this figure? Because once again, this forms part of how we see the management team and how they actually understand the finances behind the farm itself. So covering off the areas, so as I touched on, so the first one is person, so it's the people. Do we trust the people? Do we think the people in the business can achieve what they're looking to do? That's effectively what our first buy-in, our initial buy-in is going to be. Can we support the people? Because nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody would have expected, COVID, for instance, or other various issues that may happen on a global scale. These are things that nobody can really necessarily hide from or change from where we are. But what we won't do is penalise, or what we shouldn't do is penalise the business necessarily for things that they cannot control or outside of their control. So what we rely on is the hope that the management team or the people behind the business have the ability to sort of recover from it or manage themselves best possible within that situation. And 9 times out of 10 is the bank should be prepared to back the business. I know from my previous history, especially covering sort of the southwest of Scotland, when the dairy prices hit rock bottom, we stepped in and tried to secure it and back as many people as possible through that period of turmoil. And that was done through solid management teams and people with the ability to be able to provide us with the required financial information that we asked for. Affordability comes into it, so yeah, we'll fall back to a default where the business, not necessarily from the outset, has to be able to afford it from day one, but they have to be able to show through cash flows or budgets based on what they have and making sure obviously it's realistic that the business will get to a point where it will be able to afford the debt that's required. Equity and security and stuff, so these are fallback positions. Like anything, we never want to be in a position where we have to go down the route of having to take security or forcing something down that side. So I would say our first key areas is the management around the business, the people in the business. Then is it affordable and realistic, and then obviously we'll look at what security packages are there. We have provided facilities that have been on an unsecured basis, if we feel it's for the right people at the time. So, as I say, that just sort of expands a little bit on what I was talking about and gives you a bit of an idea of where, what these sort of key areas sort of cover for what we're looking at, within those 4 key elements. On the next sort of slide for ourselves, so you need to take obviously account of the variation within the farm itself. What are these potential areas that we have concern around? So management ability, there's a less cost, sort of more output that we look for, so sort of streamlining the business, a focus more on financial performance, especially in my earlier times, especially mainly dealing with the dairy sector and stuff, was the question of, what is your cost of production? And very rarely did I ever get someone that could just immediately, pick that number and tell me exactly what it was. But what we're seeing now is people now being a bit more aware of the performance and the margins within the business, and being prepared to sort of have that number to hand and treating it, as I say, more of a sort of commercial entity. Planning ahead, may sound simple, but it's like everything. You go through your cycles, and that we'll normally find towards this time of the year that as most farmers will be, they'll be back in the farmhouse, and this is probably the time where they'll potentially start to look at what's required for next year. So that's what we want to see, conversations to be had as to what is required and what's needed. Back to the benchmarking. So how does the farm perform against its peers, in an even playing field across the UK? As we said before, peer support, similar to what's happening tonight. Is our support within the network, is there challenges being made to try and improve on that? And we touched on accounts and how most of the time, I would say accountancies focus on tax minimisation, and sometimes the bank's forgotten about when it comes to annual accounts. The business has to produce accounts that will show affordability, and also if you're looking to, hypothetically, you think the neighbour's farm, for instance, may be coming up for sale, it might not be the best time to be producing accounts that are showing a very low profit or potentially a loss. It may be mitigated, and we can take these into certain circumstances, but you need to be trying to showcase the business in its best possible light, especially if you are looking to growth or expand further down the line. So very just sort of a rough idea within a couple of the sectors of where we sort of see most of the costs or variation within certain sectors. It's not exact science, as I say. It was just, as I say, this is just to give you an overview of where you may have a look at and you think, well, where could I improve on? What potentially could I change to try and get that output a little bit better. So these are some of the things we'll sometimes have a conversation with customers, and they'll ask for, well, this is what I'm looking for. So this is just a very basic requirement at 300,000 at 3% over 10 years. So taking into account, very simple, just 35,000 roughly cost a year, and on the books, you just see that the farm has obviously made a profit of 50,000. So after everything's roughly gone out the door, there's a nice profit of 50,000. So the obvious question is from there, do you think the business can afford the loan? So very simple, working out if we were looking at it, from a profit before finance costs, adding back in some depreciation, and then normally what sometimes is forgotten, you do have to pay yourself, and you do have to take some either drawings or some tax requirement that might be there. So if we were looking at the next scale, just based on that, working out at 50,000 plus a depreciation, and then drawings were taken, that on a basic level with evidence that the business had an inability to hit the required 35,000 that was needed to cover off the loan. So this just falls back to just ensuring, when you're looking at the accounts and how they operate, is to make sure that you've got enough leeway from the annual accounts. Now, annual accounts are historic. view of the business, and they provide us a track record and an average overview. I would always strongly put towards the business to be providing management information, so it's up to date. Where is the business now, not where it was potentially 9, 10, 12 months ago. So always, as I say, to try and look to best position the business where possible. I always, if I walk into a farming enterprise or a business and I sit at the table and the customer hands me over budgets, cash flows, management information, then it ticks a massive box, because they're prepared, they're ready, they have an understanding for what the bank is about to ask for or look for. A general thing that's used within a couple of my colleagues, as a starting place. So, character, ability, means, purpose, amount, repayment, insurance. It's something we'll sort of run through when requests or new to bank customers come to speak to us. We will sort of run through that general sort of heightened understanding of where we think. So, is the character good? Is the ability of the business and the people there? Do they have the means at their disposal to hit what is required? What is the actual purpose for what they need the financing for? Is the amount realistic? Is it enough? And then obviously is the repayment and security there to provide us the comfort. So as I say, with these areas, so character falls within our track record, reputation, ambition, enthusiasm for what they want to do. It may sound a bit weird maybe saying enthusiasm, but we do want our customers to be fully engaged in what they want to do and how they want to operate within the request. Ability, well, obviously there is the occasional. I am not from a direct farming background. We do have colleagues that are farmers that have gone into banking. So, as I say, I won't be here to teach you how to farm or critique that, but we just want to make sure, obviously, that the knowledge for the sector or for what they're looking to do or who they've brought on board ticks the boxes on the personal level. And then the financial side is something that we are happy to help with or to adapt or provide additional support as and where required outside of the standard sort of accountancy issues. Means in itself, it's just, in regards to our general sort of startups, we look at obviously what is being offered from the customer. Are we looking to just start from scratch? Is it a new entrant? Is it tenanted farming, for instance, or if there is actually some assets, liabilities in the background that they're looking to increase on. Purpose. I'm not going to expand more on these, but just general, working capital. Is it expanded? Land, buildings, stuff along those lines. Diversification plans, or are we looking to do something for succession planning? So we are potentially looking to split a unit or bring on other land to adapt and change into another unit to allow for succession planning to be successful. Amounts. Funnily enough, it may seem weird, but some people feel that if they come asking for the real amount, we probably will say no, right? And they'll come in under what they need, thinking that's a better way, but it normally doesn't work out that way. So if you need to ensure that what you're looking for, it's enough in regards to the working capital or potential for expansion. At the same time, we need to ensure that everything is kept in regards to, especially for land purchases. So you need to fall within your remit of affordability or in regards to your loan to value. Normally loan to value across the sector is about 70%. So yeah, for every 100,000 that's an asset, you have ability, to borrow sort of 70,000 against that as such. And the structure, don't be afraid, to structure it over a longer periods of time. Some of the assets that are there should be structured over that or viewed as long-term assets. Obviously, like an overdraft, for instance, is 12 months, but don't put the business under pressure to repay down debt. It might look good from a business plan that you're being really aggressive and you're going to pay it down and you'll be debt-free, but what potentially you've got there is just putting pressure on the business to make sure it hits these numbers, especially if it's a diversification that's going in or you're starting up potentially in a new area that needs time to allow the system to kick in and start generating the profits that's needed. The repayment side, so just the general serviceability, covering off the key areas that we look for. Sensitivity, it's just thinking outside of the box. What if you were to lose, even if it was dairy, your key dairy manager, for instance, if he was to leave and go somewhere else, what would happen? And so forth like that. So it's having an understanding of what you have. What would happen if milk prices were reduced, feed prices went up, and things like, in general, things like that. So it's building these sensitivity into the plan, as I touched on before. So it's all good showing the positive, but we do need to see some sort of realistic views. If the market was to go in a downward trend, how would that work? And it's similar to if interest rates were to rise. It may be affordable now at 2% hypothetically, but what if interest rates were to rise to 5%? So you need to budget in these sort of general requirements. Mitigants, so as we know, reduction within basic payment schemes are coming into play. So conversations I've had with customers over the past few years, if not before, was how are we going to work together to try and get the business into a place where it's not relying on the subsidy payments to keep it profit, or continue to make it profitable. Insurance side, it just covers over general assets that are there. What the bank does to ensure, obviously, the assets are kept in good shape, and also the people within the businesses, or any additional support that they may require, so life cover, insurances, and so forth. Excuse me. So interest rates. So majority of banks now should be operating within Bank of England rate rather than potentially LIBOR. So what you'll probably see now, or should be seeing, is a margin that's provided to you by the bank, so hypothetically 2%, and then reference rate will be on Bank of England. So at the moment it's 0.1. So that would give you the all-in rate of 2.1. So you have the options of variable and fixed. Some people might view, especially if it's a potential large deal that you're looking to do, say, if it was £1 million or something along those lines, you might say, I'll fix 500,000 and I'll keep the rest on variable. Because interest rates are low at the moment, so there's a potential that if you fixed in for 10 years at 2.1, that hopefully in 10 years time, if interest rates were to rise, you'd be protected against that increase. Also gives you the ability to offset some of your costs within your business if you know that you've got a fixed cost to meet. It means that if you do have good years, that potentially you can repay more into the variable side and get that down, or paid down quicker if needed. Arrangement fees, they'll change across the bank, but they can be anything between 1 and 1.5% based on the loan amount. So these are things you need to factor in. along with potentially valuation fees and legal fees. Sometimes you might get too head up in the plan and not actually then think, well, I've just bought this for X amount, but I've not actually put aside any additional capital for the fees that are associated with the lending. Certain lending conditions, so most banks now will be asking for at least annual accounts to be provided within a certain timescales, normally 9 months or 12 months, depending if it's a limited company or a partnership or sole trader. There also could be conditions set aside that you need to hit. So you might need to hit a debt service cover or a multiplier and so forth. I always, from my point of view, if customers are going into lending or a debts facility and there is conditions or covenants attached to that, they should seek legal advice and have their accountant on board with it. Because if you breach these facilities, it could either increase your margin, increase your cost, or potentially put you into a default situation. So they're not there just as a good to have. They can be, as I say, used as a measuring tool, and it can impact the business in the future if not met. So that, as I say, is a sort of general overview on the business plan and sort of strategy that the banks or ourselves sort of focus on. And I'll go back to the sort of the key main areas to really sort of emphasize within it. That would be, so number one is the person, number two is the affordability, number three, equity, what they have, and then four is security on that side. We do have information and literature that we can provide. You don't have to be a customer of HSBC. We send out, or we provide, an annual forward planning book, which covers off various sectors and obviously provides insight and information from the bank, and gives you a bit of an understanding, and also gives you key areas to focus on if you are approaching the bank and having those conversations. At the moment, we normally would have hard copies of these. With COVID, things have been put on hold for a little bit. So I'm thinking that we might be going to full digitalization of the forward planning. So happy at some point, if required, to be able to provide a link to this or copies to George in due course. Just as an offshoot from the financial planning, I won't necessarily go through all of the remaining slides that are there, but please be mindful of cybercrime or fraudulent activity. Banks should never ask you for PIN numbers, security passwords that you've set up. Be aware of invoices coming in that don't look right or from people you've never dealt with before. Obviously, big times, the years when subsidy payments were being paid, and that you normally find some customers being targeted. Text messages from banks providing you with additional information and so forth, and asking you to either call back on this number or complete further information. If it doesn't look right or feel right, don't continue with it, and pick up the phone to a number that you know and speak to a person that you know. As I say, it's better to be safe than sorry. Anyone legitimately speaking to you or contacting you from a bank should never be annoyed if you decide not to continue with the call because you don't feel it's right. So that's where I just wanted to finish off. As I say, it's a big focus within the bank, is just to ensure that everyone is taking safe measures to protect themselves against fraudulent claims and cybercrime. So from my point of view, I'm happy to take any questions or queries that have came in.
We've got quite a few questions coming through. David, thank you for covering that in such great detail. I know there's an awful lot of information there to condensed down into an hour. So I'll just maybe start on some of the questions. What are your thoughts on interest rates over the next sort of 10 to 15 years? So looking at the longer term view.
To be honest, it's a hard one because you know, if we took the at the time with obviously the credit crunch and everything that happened with that, and interest rates, you know, coming from 5-6% and dropping down, we were back, you know, on a slow recovery back from that. The view, I think, from the Bank of England, and it's always been, is they want to get to 3.5%. That's where I think they see that happy number, if you want to say that's where I think they want to get to. I can't see. I don't want to be held it, but I can't see personally. I can't see interest rates, you know, massively increasing anytime soon. But you do have the flip side where businesses still have to, obviously, as banks and so forth, still have to generate income. So variable rate people, obviously, if you have a mortgage and along those lines, will start to see the benefit of interest rates obviously going down. But I think, you know, interest rates, if you're looking at margins, I think you're sort of commercial level, and I put that as a sort of around about the £1 million upwards. You know, I think you're sort of looking at that sort of 2.5 margin. But this is all down to the business, the risk. There's a lot of other factors that go into generating a cost or an indicative rate as such. It's not just, you know, how much you're borrowing. As I say, our main focus is the people. You know, that's the biggest risk in reality, is the people within the business. And can we rely on them to sort of hit the commitment levels?
Yeah. Following on from that, David, due to COVID-19, is now possibly a bad time to be seeking finance for tourism and hospitality, bearing in mind that there's usually at least a year of development time needed before the business actually starts making a profit. What would be your opinion on that?
Well, it depends where it is. If we're talking rural, my understanding, especially a few years, we've actually seen an uptake in people trying to escape the you know, the sort of the crowds, if you want to put it that way. Being devil's out, there's probably at any point there's never a good time to start a new business because there's always negatives. There's always, oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? If your plan looks good and is viable, then be positive about it and approach it in that manner. I've got one customer at the moment that was meant to launch towards the end of the year and it got put back with COVID, but we're still supporting it all the way through because it will work. It needs maybe a couple of tweaks and a couple of changes just due to certain regulations or things that are coming through. You know, a hotel in the city centre, you know, might not at the moment be, you know, top priority, but, you know, we're seeing rural locations starting to adapt and diversify. And also as well, you should have the ability to request, say, for instance, an interest-only period. So your capital requirements shouldn't be as intensive in the first 12, 24 months, just depending on what your plan is. So you can build that into the debt requirement or the facility.
Yeah, and just following on from that, for some of the new entrants, maybe with limited experience of finance or taking out a loan, what is the longest term loan that you will give? Is it 5 years, 10 years, or longer?
So normally you would operate on the oldest person within the partnership, if it was, for instance, that. Obviously limited companies is with the directors or obviously sole traders. So loan maximum, and it, you know, is 30 years. I would say standard normal commercial terms is probably 20. And that would be viewed for land purchases, longer term assets. Obviously, if you go down to sort of machinery or sheds and stuff, then they normally fall into anything between 5 and 15 years, just depending on how fast or how much they want to borrow. But anything from 5 years up to 30. Some banks, what they might do is provide a commitment period. So they might say, we'll give you 5 years commitment period and the repayment profile will be over 20 years. Now, what you've got to be wary with that is, and it works both ways, is that when the commitment period comes to an end, either the bank can walk away or the customer can walk away, but you might be liable for another fee, for instance, to continue on the debt. So we at HSBC, what we do is we just provide a term. So if it's 10 years, it's 10 years. That's it. If it's 20, it's 20. There's no sort of commitment period or unless it's a fixed product, for instance, then obviously that comes to an end. But we try to sort of steer at the moment away from that. We just provide a term that is requested by the customer.
Yeah, makes sense. And just following on from that, David, is it necessary to have a full up-to-date valuation of the farm when seeking finance?
HSBC, so we as relationship directors, we can actually, we do our own valuations of the farm. So that can be a potential benefit to the customer, not having to seek professional valuation costs. The only time potentially where we would not do our own valuation would be if the deal was maybe potentially quite tight, because obviously our valuations are probably going to be more conservative just to play safe, or if there's unusual diversification that we're not used to. So if there's unique renewables, stuff like that, biomass or AD plants and stuff like that, that forms part of the major infrastructure of the business and income, then we would then seek to go out to get professional valuations. I would always try and suggest that businesses try and reevaluate themselves at least every 3 to 5 years, just to sort of give them an uplift. Obviously, there's reasons sometimes not to do valuations and get increase your assets on the balance sheet. But if you are coming to a bank or if you are looking for funding, then from a security point of view, you want to show that you've got quite a good asset backing behind you if you're looking for finance or support.
Yeah, I think we've just about got time for one more question there, David. So I'll just fire this one out to you quickly. This comes in from listener. I believe that some banks are not keen to lend to new customers who are diversifying if the serviceability of the debt is only evidence based on forecasted figures. What is HSBC's view on that type of situation?
Well, we do, and we have, that's probably the only way I could say we have, we have provided finance on security shortfall and finance, which is predominantly, especially if it's expansion or diversification, will be forecasted on businesses hitting profit levels. What I spoke about, recently was that the business that they're looking to go into was going to support 40% of the debt service cover. Initially that was put out. So I can't speak for all. Obviously, I haven't seen the case, so I don't know what was in behind the numbers or what was there. But HSBC, from our point of view, is very supportive on progressive farming, and that's really where we're trying to focus on, especially going into, well, it was meant to really be in for this year, but we've been sort of stuck indoors. But our focus heavily is with the funding that we've got and behind us is to seek diversification and progressive farming within our own customers and obviously outside for new to bank.
Yeah. As I said, I think I'm just conscious of time here, and I apologize if I haven't got around to asking your question. But as I said, I'll get all the questions and answers circulated in the post-event summary. But if you've any other questions that you maybe think of when you go away from this, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I can get back in touch with David. So
even to say, George, if my details are available, obviously I've provided them on the slide. If anyone that is online or wants to contact me, via email or by phone, then by all means I'm happy to have a chat.
Fantastic. So I'll just close on the last slide there, Jack. I'll just a wee reminder that I kindly ask you to follow the normal procedure of just filling out the wee feedback form that comes out after this meeting. They'll be circulated around via email, and I just want to remind folk that there is podcast to follow this these meetings, just to give more example on some of the content that's been mentioned. So that's a work in progress. The next Women in Ag meeting will take place on the 27th of February next year, and I'm looking for ideas on things that you guys are interested in. So please don't hesitate to contact me. As usual, there's a whole host of materials on the FAS.Scot website, including info from previous Women in Ag meetings. So lastly, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to David for taking the time out of his day to join us. We learned an awful lot there, David, and a very hard subject to cover in such a short period of time. So thank you very much for covering that in such great detail. I'd also like to just thank Tiffany and Jack for helping out in the background as well. So thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.